No one warned me that real life wouldn't test my knowledge first. It would test my patience, my decisions, my ability to stay calm when everything felt uncertain. At school, I was taught how to answer questions. But real life didn't ask questions in a clear way. It just showed up one day and said, "Now choose," without instructions, without feedback, and without a second chance button. There was a moment very early on when I realized this. I was standing in a completely normal place. Nothing dramatic, no big failure, no loud argument, just a quiet realization that no one was coming to guide me anymore. That was when I understood something uncomfortable. Life doesn't care how prepared you think you are. It only responds to what you can actually handle. And the hardest part was this. Most of the skills I needed, no one had ever mentioned before. Not in school, not in books, not in motivational talks. They were invisible skills, quiet skills, skills you only notice when you don't have them. One of the first skills real life demanded from me was decision-making without certainty. Before real life started, I believed decisions were made after you felt ready, after you felt confident, after you had enough information. That belief disappeared very quickly. Real decisions came when I felt confused, when the information was incomplete, when both options felt risky, and waiting didn't make things clearer. Waiting only made the cost higher. I learned that choosing late is also a decision, and often it's the worst one. Nobody teaches you how heavy it feels to choose something while knowing you might be wrong. So nobody prepares you for the quiet anxiety that follows a decision when there's no immediate result, no applause, no confirmation. You just live with it. Another skill I had to learn was emotional regulation. Not the kind you read about. Not stay positive. Not think happy thoughts. Real emotional regulation meant showing up when I didn't feel motivated. It meant doing necessary things while feeling tired, disappointed, or unsure. It meant not letting one bad moment define the rest of the day. School trained me to perform well on good days. Life demanded consistency on bad ones. There were days when nothing went wrong, but everything felt heavy anyway. No clear reason, no visible problem, and still, life expected progress. That was when I realized motivation is unreliable, discipline is misunderstood, but emotional stability is everything. Another skill that no one taught me was managing invisible pressure. Not pressure from deadlines, not pressure from exams, but the pressure of expectations that were never spoken. The pressure to be doing something with your life. The pressure to not fall behind. The pressure to look confident even when you weren't. This pressure didn't scream, it whispered. And because it whispered, it was harder to explain. You couldn't point to a single problem, but you could feel it in your body, in your sleep, in the way your thoughts looped at night. I learned that ignoring this pressure doesn't make it disappear. It only makes it leak into other areas of your life. So I had to learn self-awareness, not as a concept, as survival. I had to notice when I was exhausted instead of lazy, when I was overwhelmed instead of unmotivated, when I needed rest instead of more pushing. No one taught me that self-awareness is a skill you practice daily, not a personality trait you either have or don't. Another skill that surprised me was learning how to say no without guilt. Before real life, saying yes felt safe. Yes kept relationships smooth. Yes avoided conflict. Yes made me feel useful. But real life quickly showed me the cost of constant yes, burnout, resentment, losing time for things that actually mattered. I had to learn that saying no is not rejection, it's direction, and that clarity is kinder than silent exhaustion. There was also the skill of managing money related stress, even when money itself wasn't the biggest issue. Nobody taught me how much mental space money worries take, how they affect your confidence, your choices, your sense of freedom. Even small financial uncertainty can make everything feel unstable, and pretending it doesn't matter only makes it heavier. I learned that financial awareness is not greed, it's responsibility. Another skill real life demanded was the ability to be alone with my thoughts. Not loneliness, but solitude. Being alone without distractions, without noise, without external validation. At first, it was uncomfortable. My mind rushed to fill the silence. Regrets, what ifs, unanswered questions. But slowly, solitude became a place of clarity, a place where I could hear what I actually wanted, not what I was supposed to want. No one teaches you how important this skill is, because it doesn't look productive, but it changes everything. I also had to learn how to recover from mistakes quietly. Now, real life doesn't always give you dramatic failure. Sometimes it gives you small missteps, awkward moments, choices you wish you could redo. There's no ceremony for these moments, no clear lesson written underneath them. You just carry them and decide whether they will harden you or teach you. I learned that resilience is not about bouncing back loudly. It's about continuing without announcing it. Another invisible skill was learning how to manage comparisons. School encouraged comparison, scores, ranks, results. Real-life comparisons are endless and exhausting. Someone is always ahead. Someone is always doing better. Someone always seems more confident. I had to learn that comparison doesn't disappear when you grow older. You just have to stop feeding it. I learned to measure progress quietly, internally, by asking better questions. Am I learning? Am I more stable than before? Am I moving in a direction that feels honest? These questions don't impress anyone, but they build a future that doesn't collapse easily. Perhaps the most important skill real life taught me was learning how to stay when things felt slow, not quitting too early, not chasing constant excitement, not panicking when progress looked invisible, staying, showing up, repeating small actions. This skill doesn't look impressive, but it compounds. Looking back, I understand why no one taught me these skills. They can't be explained properly, they have to be lived. But if you're listening to this, and you're standing at the beginning of real life, or somewhere in the middle of it, feeling unprepared, I want you to know this. Not knowing doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're learning skills that actually matter. And these skills, quiet as they are, will shape your future far more than you expect. What surprised me most was how slowly these skills developed. There was no moment when I could say, "Now I've learned this." No clear milestone, no feeling of completion. Real-life skills grow quietly, often in moments that feel unimportant at the time. One of those skills was learning how to handle uncertainty without panic. Before, uncertainty felt like danger. If I didn't know what would happen next, my mind rushed to worst-case scenarios. I tried to control outcomes that were never fully in my control. But real life doesn't reward control. It rewards adaptability. I learned that uncertainty is not a signal to stop. It's a signal to stay flexible. Instead of asking, What's the perfect choice? I started asking. What's the next reasonable step? That shift changed everything. Another skill I had to develop was delayed confidence. In school, confidence came first. You studied, you prepared, then you felt confident. Only after that did you act. In real life, it's reversed. You act while feeling unsure. Confidence comes later, as a result of surviving the experience. Waiting to feel confident meant waiting forever. So I learned to move forward with incomplete confidence. To trust that clarity often appears after action, not before it. There was also the skill of managing energy, not just time. No one taught me that time management alone isn't enough. You can schedule every hour of your day and still feel exhausted. Energy is affected by emotions, by stress, by unresolved thoughts. I learned to pay attention to what drained me and what quietly restored me. Some conversations looked harmless, but left me feeling heavy. Some habits felt productive, but slowly burned me out. Managing energy meant making small adjustments, saying no earlier, resting before exhaustion, stopping activities that looked impressive but felt empty. Another unexpected skill was learning how to ask for help properly. Before real life, asking for help felt like failure, like admitting weakness, like exposing incompetence. But real life showed me that struggling silently often creates bigger problems than asking early. I learned that asking for help is not saying, I can't do this. It's saying, I want to do this better. And the right kind of help doesn't remove responsibility, it sharpens it. I also had to learn how to accept feedback without letting it define me. Feedback in real life isn't graded, it's messy, sometimes unclear, sometimes emotional, sometimes unfair. At first, every piece of feedback felt personal, like a judgment of my value. Over time, I learned to separate identity from performance, to listen without collapsing, to adjust without losing myself. This skill alone saved me from years of unnecessary self-doubt. Another skill that emerged slowly was learning how to stay consistent without external pressure. In school, deadlines forced consistency. Exams created urgency. Someone always checked your progress. Real life doesn't check in. It doesn't remind you. It doesn't care if you procrastinate. Consistency became a private agreement with myself. I learned that motivation fades, but routines can carry you through days when enthusiasm disappears. This wasn't about discipline as punishment, it was about structure as support. I also discovered the skill of emotional recovery, not avoiding negative emotions, but recovering from them faster. Bad days still happened. Disappointments still hurt. But I learned to shorten the recovery time. Instead of spiraling for weeks, I allowed myself to feel, then gently returned to movement. Recovery became a skill I practiced, not a personality trait I waited for. There was also the skill of redefining success. Before real life, success was visible. Grades, recognition, approval. Real life success is often invisible. Stability, peace of mind, progress that only you can measure. I learned to respect small wins, a calm response instead of an emotional one, a thoughtful decision instead of a rushed one, choosing rest instead of proving something. These wins don't look impressive online, but they build a life that feels sustainable. Another important skill was learning how to let go of outdated versions of myself. The person I thought I would become didn't fully exist. Some dreams changed, some priorities shifted. At first, this felt like failure, like betrayal of my younger self. But I learned that growth often means revision. Letting go is not quitting, it's updating. I also had to learn how to sit with discomfort without rushing to escape it. Discomfort doesn't always mean danger. Sometimes it means growth. Sometimes it means adjustment. Instead of distracting myself immediately, I learned to listen. What is this discomfort pointing to? What needs attention? This skill made my decisions calmer and more intentional. Another invisible skill was learning how to manage expectations, both my own and others. I learned that unclear expectations create resentment. Clear boundaries create respect. I practiced communicating limits earlier, even when it felt awkward. Awkward honesty turned out to be easier than silent frustration. Perhaps one of the most underrated skills was learning how to trust slow progress. Real life doesn't move in dramatic leaps. It moves in quiet accumulation, small habits, repeated choices, daily decisions no one applauds. I learned that impatience doesn't speed things up. It only steals peace. Trusting slow progress required faith, not in outcomes, but in the process. And through all of this, I realized something deeply grounding. See, real life didn't start when I felt ready. It started when I accepted that readiness is built through experience. These skills didn't make life easy, but they made it manageable, meaningful, stable, and most importantly, they made the future feel less intimidating, even when it remained uncertain. As time passed, I stopped asking when life would finally feel stable. That question quietly disappeared. Instead, a different understanding took its place. Stability is not a destination, it's a skill set. And once I saw life through that lens, everything felt different. I noticed that people who seemed ahead weren't necessarily smarter or luckier. They were simply better at handling discomfort without letting it stop them. They knew how to move forward while feeling uncertain. They knew how to keep going without constant reassurance. Those were not talents. They were trained responses. One of the most powerful skills I developed was learning how to think long-term while acting short-term. Before, I needed immediate results to feel motivated. If something didn't pay off quickly, I doubted the entire direction. But real life rewards patience disguised as persistence. I learned to ask myself a different question. If this doesn't change my life today, will it change my life in a year? That question saved me from quitting too early and from chasing distractions that looked exciting but led nowhere. Another skill that shaped my future was learning how to rebuild after internal failure. Not failure that others noticed, but private disappointment. The moments when I didn't live up to my own standards, when I avoided something important, when I chose comfort over growth. No one teaches you how to recover from self-disappointment. It's quiet. There's no apology to accept, no external forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself and still move forward. That skill alone determines whether you stagnate or continue evolving. I also learned the skill of emotional honesty with myself. Not dramatic honesty, not self-criticism, but clear acknowledgement. Naming what I was actually feeling instead of what I thought I should feel. Confusion, fear, doubt, resistance. Once named, emotions lost their power to control me. They became signals instead of obstacles. This skill made my decisions calmer and my reactions slower is the best way. Another deeply important skill was learning how to build self-trust. Self-trust doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from showing up consistently, from doing what you said you would do, especially when no one was watching. Each small promise kept became evidence. Over time, I stopped needing external validation to feel grounded. That didn't make me indifferent. It made me stable. I also had to learn how to navigate moments when progress felt invisible. These moments are dangerous. They make you question everything. I learned that invisible progress is still progress. Roots grow underground before anything appears above the surface, and pulling them out to check only delays growth. Trusting invisible progress is one of the hardest skills to master, but it separates long-term builders from short-term quitters. Another future-shaping skill was learning how to adjust expectations without lowering standards. Lowering expectations creates comfort. Lowering standards creates regret. I learned to stay ambitious but flexible, to aim high while accepting detours. This balance prevented burnout and preserved momentum. I also discovered the skill of choosing environments intentionally. Before, I believed motivation was internal, but environment quietly shapes behavior. I learned to place myself where good habits were easier and bad habits were less tempting. Not through dramatic change, but small adjustments. Where I worked, who I listened to, what I consumed daily. Environment became a silent partner in my growth. Another crucial skill was learning how to end chapters gracefully. Not everything needs closure conversations. Not every ending need explanation. Some chapters end when you stop showing up. So learning to leave without bitterness and without burning bridges is a form of maturity no one teaches. It protects your peace and keeps your future open. I also had to learn how to stay curious instead of defensive. Curiosity keeps learning alive. Defensiveness freezes growth. When something challenged my beliefs, I practiced listening instead of reacting. This skill expanded my perspective and reduced unnecessary conflict. And slowly, life felt less like a test and more like a process. A process I could participate in consciously. Looking back now, I understand something clearly. Real life doesn't reward perfection, it rewards adaptability. It doesn't punish uncertainty, it exposes rigidity. The skills that matter most are not loud. They don't look impressive. They don't come with certificates. But they quietly shape your future through daily decisions. If you're listening to this and you feel unprepared, behind, or unsure, let me ask you something important. Are you learning to decide without certainty? Are you learning to regulate emotions instead of avoiding them? Are you learning to stay consistent without applause? Because if you are more future-ready than you think. You don't need to have everything figured out. You need skills that keep you moving when clarity is missing. And those skills, once built, will carry you further than any plan ever could. If this episode helped you see your own journey more clearly, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me continue sharing stories and ideas that prepare you for real life, not just ideal situations.